The year was 2347, and humanity had stretched its reach far beyond Earth, colonizing planets and moons across the galaxy. But with expansion came conflict. The United Stellar Forces, USF, Earth's military arm, now found itself locked in a tense Cold War with the Zalari Federation, a coalition of advanced alien species whose motives were as mysterious as their shimmering silver ships. Among the soldiers stationed along the edge of this fragile peace was Captain Elias Drake, a man known for his sharp instincts and unshakable sense of duty. Elias stood on the cracked surface of Kairos 9, a barren moon that marked the border between human-controlled space and Zalari territory. His breath fogged up the visor of his helmet as he scanned the horizon through binoculars. The wind carried fine dust that scratched against his armor like whispers from another world. It was quiet, too quiet. This part of the galaxy felt heavy with secrets, and Elias hated it. He wasn't just any soldier, he was a survivor. Years of battles had hardened him, but they hadn't erased the scars of his past. Deep inside, Elias carried something no one else knew about. A name whispered to him by his mother when he was a child. Aran, she used to call him, her voice soft and full of love. After her death, he buried that name deep within himself, refusing to let anyone hear it again. To everyone else, he was simply Captain Drake, the man who followed orders without question. That day, however, everything changed. Elias led a small patrol unit near the demilitarized zone, an invisible line drawn in the stars where neither side dared cross. As they moved cautiously across the rocky terrain, a sudden flash of light caught his attention. Squinting, he saw a group of figures approaching, not soldiers, but diplomats. At their center walked someone who didn't belong to either faction. She was tall and radiant, her skin glowing faintly blue under the dim sunlight. Her robes shimmered like liquid metal, and her golden eyes seemed to pierce straight through him. It was Princess Lirael, heir to the Zalari throne. Elias froze, unsure why his heart raced at the sight of her. Something about her presence felt familiar. He raised his hand to signal his team to hold position as Lirael stepped forward. Her gaze locked onto his, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Then, without warning, she leaned closer, her lips brushing near his earpiece. "Aran," she whispered softly, using a tone so intimate it sent chills down his spine. Elias staggered back, his mind reeling. How could she possibly know that name? No one alive knew it except him. And even then, he hadn't spoken it aloud in decades. Before he could demand answers, Lirael turned away, disappearing into thin air alongside her entourage. 1 second they were there, and the next, they were gone, leaving behind only silence and swirling dust. "What the hell was that?" muttered Sergeant Cole, one of Elias' subordinates, breaking the stunned quiet. "I don't know," Elias replied, though his voice betrayed the storm raging inside him. Who was she? And how did she know something so deeply personal? Back at base, Elias couldn't shake the encounter. That single word, his childhood name, echoed in his thoughts like a ghost from the past. Was it a trick, a coincidence, or was there something more going on here, something bigger than he could comprehend? Whatever the truth was, Elias knew one thing for certain. His life would never be the same again. Elias sat alone in his quarters, the dim glow of a desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. The name Aran lingered in his mind like an uninvited guest, refusing to leave. He clenched and unclenched his fists, trying to make sense of what had happened earlier that day. How could Princess Lirael, a complete stranger, know something so private? It didn't just feel wrong, it felt impossible. His commanding officer, Colonel Harris, had dismissed the incident as irrelevant. "Stress," he'd said with a shrug. "You've been out here too long, Drake. Get some rest." But Elias knew better. This wasn't stress or paranoia. It was real. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, those golden eyes piercing through him as if she could read his soul. And then there was the way she said his name. Not Elias, but Aran. She spoke it like someone who truly knew him, not the soldier wearing the uniform, but the boy who once played under Earth's blue skies. That night, sleep eluded him. Instead, dreams took hold, vivid and strange. He found himself standing on a foreign planet bathed in violet light. Towers made of crystal stretched toward the heavens, their surfaces shimmering like water. Around him, beings moved, some humanoid, others alien. But all seemed familiar. In the distance, he heard a voice calling his name, soft yet insistent. Aran, it whispered, echoing through the air. He woke with a start, drenched in sweat. His heart pounded as fragments of the dream lingered in his mind. What did it mean? Was this some kind of message, or just his overactive imagination? The next morning brought no answers, only more questions. Reports flooded in from other patrols along the border. Small Zilari ships had been spotted entering restricted zones, though none engaged in hostile actions. Some speculated they were searching for something or someone. Rumors spread among the troops, each wilder than the last. Some claimed the aliens were looking for spies, while others thought they might be preparing for war. But Elias couldn't shake the feeling that somehow these events were connected to him. Determined to find answers, Elias began digging into classified files stored in the base's database. Using his clearance level, he accessed records detailing humanity's first contact with the Zalari centuries ago. Most of the information was heavily redacted, but one phrase caught his attention. Asterisk soul resonance theory. Asterisk, according to the fragment he uncovered, the Zalari believed that souls could transcend death and rebirth, carrying memories across lifetimes. They even claimed certain individuals bore echoes of past lives, recognizable by specific markers. Could that explain Lirael's knowledge of his name? Could she somehow see remnants of his past life? The idea seemed absurd, yet it gnawed at him. If true, it meant everything he thought he knew about himself, and his place in the universe was incomplete. Later that evening, Elias returned to his quarters to find his personal terminal blinking with an incoming message. Hesitant, he activated the screen. A distorted image of Princess Lirael appeared, her expression urgent. "Captain Drake," she began, her voice steady despite the static. "If you wish to understand the truth, come to me. Alone. Coordinates attached." Elias stared at the screen, his pulse quickening. Meeting her would violate every protocol he'd sworn to uphold. Yet, deep down, he knew he couldn't ignore this. Whatever secrets lay hidden beneath the surface of Kairos 9, whatever connection existed between them, he needed to uncover it. Against his better judgment, and risking severe consequences, Elias made his decision. He grabbed his gear, checked his weapon, and slipped out of the base under cover of darkness. As he set off into the unknown, one thought echoed in his mind. Who was he really? And what role did he play in the tangled history between humans and Zalari? The stars above watched silently as Elias disappeared into the night, stepping closer to answers that would change everything. The coordinates led Elias to a jagged ridge overlooking a crystalline canyon that shimmered faintly in the twilight. The air was thin here, and the cold bit through his armor as he scanned the area for any sign of danger. For a moment, he wondered if this was all some elaborate trap. But then he saw her, Princess Lirael, standing at the edge of the cliff, her silver robes catching the dim light like liquid starlight. She turned to face him, her golden eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his breath catch. "You came," she said softly, though it wasn't a question. Her voice carried a weight that suggested she'd been expecting nothing less. "I didn't have much choice," Elias replied, keeping his tone guarded. He adjusted the strap of his rifle slung across his chest, ensuring she knew he wasn't unarmed or unprepared. "Start talking. How do you know my name?" Lirael hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. Then she took a step closer, her movements graceful yet deliberate. "Because we've met before," she said finally. "Not in this life, but in another." Elias frowned, his grip tightening on his weapon. What are you talking about? Another life. She nodded, her expression calm, but tinged with sadness. In Xylari belief, souls can transcend death and rebirth, carrying fragments of memory from one existence to the next. When I looked into your eyes back at the border, I recognized you. You were someone else once, a human diplomat named Aran. We worked together centuries ago during humanity's first contact with my people. Elias felt a chill run down his spine. It sounded insane, impossible even. And yet, why did it feel like she was telling the truth? Memories flickered at the edges of his mind, vague and fleeting, like shadows dancing just out of reach. If what you're saying is true, he said slowly, then why don't I remember any of it? Because time erases much, Lirael explained, but not everything. Somewhere deep inside, pieces of who you were remain. That's why I could sense you, and why I knew your name. Elias shook his head, struggling to process what she was saying. Even if I believe you, which I'm not saying I do, why tell me now? Why risk coming here? Because history is repeating itself, Lirael replied, her voice growing urgent. Centuries ago, our two peoples tried to forge peace, but betrayal shattered those efforts. A war followed, leaving scars that still divide us today. I believe the answers lie hidden beneath Kairos 9, in artifacts left behind by those who once sought to bridge our worlds. If we find them, we might uncover the truth about what really happened, and perhaps rewrite the future. Her words stirred something within Elias, a spark of curiosity mingled with unease. He glanced toward the canyon below, its crystalline formations glowing faintly in the fading light. And you think these artifacts will prove whatever story you're spinning? They won't prove my story, Lirael corrected gently. They'll prove yours. Yours and mine, and everyone else caught in this endless cycle of mistrust. After a long pause, Elias sighed. As reckless as it seemed, he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her words, or the strange familiarity lurking in the corners of his mind. Fine, he said at last. Show me where to start looking. But if this turns out to be some kind of trick— It isn't, Lirael interrupted firmly. And I swear to you, Captain Drake, I only want peace. With that, she motioned for him to follow her down into the canyon. The descent was treacherous, the rocky terrain slick with frost underfoot. Strange bioluminescent plants dotted the landscape, casting eerie green and blue hues around them. Every step deeper into the canyon felt like moving further away from reality, and closer to something ancient and unknowable. As they walked, Lirael began pointing out symbols carved into the rocks, delicate patterns resembling constellations. To Elias' astonishment, some of them bore striking similarities to designs etched into his family crest back on Earth. His pulse quickened. Could there truly be a connection between his lineage and this alien world? Finally, they reached a massive cavern entrance partially concealed by overgrown crystals. Inside, the air hummed faintly, vibrating against his skin like a low-frequency song. Lirael stopped just short of entering, turning to look at him with an unreadable expression. This is it, she whispered. Are you ready to face what lies ahead? Elias stared into the darkness beyond the threshold, uncertainty warring with determination. Whatever awaited them inside, he knew one thing for certain. There was no turning back now. The cavern swallowed them whole, its mouth yawning wide like the maw of some ancient beast. Inside, the air grew colder, heavier, pressing against Elias' chest with every step he took. The faint hum that had greeted them at the entrance grew louder, resonating through the walls as if the very stone were alive. Lirael led the way, her glowing robes casting soft light across their path, revealing jagged stalactites and uneven terrain beneath their feet. Elias kept his rifle ready, scanning the shadows for movement. He didn't trust this place, or the eerie stillness that seemed to stretch endlessly ahead of them. How much farther? He asked, his voice low but sharp enough to echo slightly. Not far, Lirael replied without looking back. Her tone was calm, almost serene, which only made Elias more uneasy. How could she remain so composed when they were venturing deeper into unknown territory, surrounded by who knows what dangers? The deeper they went, the stranger the environment became. Bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls, pulsing in rhythmic patterns that mimicked breathing. Strange, insect-like creatures scurried out of sight whenever the light touched them, their chitinous bodies clicking softly against the rock. At one point, Elias swore he saw something larger, a shadow darting just beyond the edge of visibility. But when he turned to confront it, there was nothing. Finally, they'd reached a massive chamber unlike anything Elias had ever seen. In the center stood a towering monolith, its surface etched with intricate symbols that shimmered faintly, as though infused with energy. The air around it vibrated intensely, making Elias' teeth ache. His gaze shifted between the artifact and Lirael, whose expression had shifted from calm determination to quiet awe. "This is it," she murmured, stepping closer to the monolith. "This is where the truth lies." Elias hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to stay back. But curiosity, and perhaps something deeper, drove him forward. As they approached, the symbols on the monolith began to glow brighter, reacting to their presence. Suddenly, holographic images burst forth, projecting scenes into the air above the artifact. What unfolded before them was both mesmerizing and horrifying. The recordings depicted humanity's first contact with the Zalari centuries ago. Humans and aliens stood side by side, exchanging knowledge and forging tentative alliances. Among them was a figure Elias recognized instantly. It was him, or rather, the man he'd been in another life. Aran. He watched as Aran worked tirelessly alongside a younger version of Lirael, advocating for peace even as tensions rose. Then came the betrayal. A shadowy faction within humanity sabotaged negotiations, framing the Zalari for atrocities they never committed. Chaos erupted, and Aran, discovering the truth too late, was silenced permanently, leaving the cycle of mistrust to spiral out of control. Elias staggered back, overwhelmed by the weight of what he was seeing. It wasn't just history, it felt like memory. Fragments of emotions surfaced, raw and vivid. Hope, frustration, despair. He clenched his fists, struggling to breathe. "It's real," he whispered hoarsely. "All of it." Lirael nodded solemnly. "Yes, and now we must decide what to do with it." Before they could act, however, danger struck. A low growl echoed through the chamber, followed by the sound of claws scraping against stone. From the darkness emerged a pack of predators, hulking, wolf-like creatures with glowing eyes and rows of razor-sharp teeth. They circled the pair, closing in slowly, hunger evident in their movements. Elias raised his rifle, heart pounding. "Stay behind me," he barked, taking aim. But the creatures were fast, lunging toward them with terrifying speed. Just as one leaped at Elias, Lirael stepped forward, her hands glowing with an otherworldly energy. With a flick of her wrist, she sent the creature flying backward, slamming it into the wall with telekinetic force. More attacks followed, but together, Elias and Lirael fought fiercely, relying on each other's strengths. By the time the last predator fell, both were battered and exhausted, but alive. Standing amidst the carnage, Elias looked at Lirael, gratitude and admiration mingling in his gaze. "We can't let this end here," he said firmly. "Whatever happens next, we finish this, together." Lirael met his eyes, nodding. For the first time, Elias felt truly connected, not just to her, but to the mission they shared. Whatever secrets remained hidden, they would uncover them, no matter the cost. Back at the base, Elias sat alone in the dimly lit briefing room, staring at the data chip containing the holographic recordings they had recovered from the monolith. The weight of what he'd seen pressed down on him like a physical force. Centuries of mistrust, wars fought over lies. It was all laid bare in those images. And worst of all, humanity wasn't the victim. It was complicit. He knew presenting this evidence wouldn't be easy. High-ranking officials within the United Stellar Forces, USF, would fight tooth and nail to bury the truth. But Elias couldn't let that happen, not when the stakes were so high. He inserted the chip into a secure terminal, reviewing the footage one last time. Each frame felt like a punch to the gut, but also a call to action. This wasn't just about clearing his conscience anymore. It was about righting centuries of wrongs. Summoning his commanding officer, Colonel Harris, along with several senior staff members, Elias played the recordings for them. Silence filled the room as the holograms flickered to life, showing humanity's betrayal during first contact. When the video ended, no one spoke immediately. Then, slowly, voices erupted, angry, defensive, dismissive. "This is nonsense," snapped Major Graves, slamming his fist on the table. "It's clearly fabricated. How do we even know these aren't Sci-Fi propaganda?" Colonel Harris leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "Even if it's real, which I'm not saying it is, we can't release something like this. It would destabilize everything." Elias clenched his jaw, anger boiling beneath the surface. "You're missing the point," he said sharply. "This isn't about politics or power. It's about truth. If we don't acknowledge what happened, nothing will ever change. We'll keep repeating the same mistakes." But his words fell on deaf ears. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions hardening into resolve. They weren't interested in justice. They were focused on protecting the status quo. Elias realized then that he was fighting an uphill battle against people who had too much to lose. As the meeting broke up, Elias lingered behind, frustration gnawing at him. Just as he was about to leave, a shadow moved near the doorway. Turning quickly, he found himself face to face with Lieutenant Caldwell, a young intelligence officer known for her sharp mind and quiet demeanor. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I believe you," she whispered urgently. "And I think I can help." Elias studied her cautiously. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I've seen fragments of this before," Caldwell admitted. "Classified files hint at rogue factions within our ranks, groups still operating in secret, covering up old crimes. They're dangerous, Captain. If you push too hard, they'll silence you permanently." Her warning sent a chill through him, but Elias nodded grimly. "Then we need to expose them before they have a chance to act." With Caldwell's help, Elias began piecing together a plan. They reached out to independent journalists, leaking portions of the data to ensure public pressure mounted. Meanwhile, Caldwell worked her contacts within the military, gathering allies willing to risk speaking out. Word spread rapidly across human colonies, sparking outrage and protests demanding accountability. But the resistance struck back swiftly. One night, as Elias reviewed more classified documents in his quarters, alarms blared throughout the base. A squad of heavily armed mercenaries stormed inside, moving with precision. Elias barely had time to grab his rifle before they cornered him in the hallway. "Where's the evidence?" growled their leader, a scared man with cold eyes. "Hand it over, or we'll make sure no one hears your side of the story." Elias raised his weapon, stalling for time. Just as the situation seemed hopeless, Lyrael appeared unexpectedly, having tracked him using Sci-Fi technology. With a wave of her hand, she unleashed a burst of telekinetic energy, sending the mercenaries sprawling. Together, Elias and Lyrael escaped into the night, clutching the precious data chip tightly. As they fled, Elias glanced at Lyrael, gratitude and determination burning in his eyes. "We're running out of time," he said, "but we're not done yet." Lyrael nodded, her expression resolute. "Then let's finish what we started." The fight for truth was far from over, but neither was their resolve. The days that followed were a blur of chaos and urgency. Elias and Lyrael worked tirelessly, operating from hidden locations to avoid capture by both USF forces and rogue mercenaries. The leaked data had ignited a firestorm across human colonies, with protests erupting on multiple planets. Journalists dug deeper into the classified files, uncovering more evidence of corruption and cover-ups within Earth's highest echelons of power. The truth was spreading faster than anyone could contain it, but so was the resistance. Elias knew they couldn't keep running forever. They needed a decisive move, something bold enough to force change before their enemies silenced them permanently. Lirael agreed, proposing a daring plan. Present the evidence directly at an emergency summit between human and Xelari leaders aboard a neutral space station orbiting Kairos 9. It was risky, walking straight into a hornet's nest. But if they succeeded, it might finally break the chains of centuries-old mistrust. With Caldwell's help, they secured transport to the station under forged identities. As they approached the massive structure floating against the backdrop of stars, Elias felt a mix of hope and dread. This was their last chance. If they failed here, there would be no second opportunities. Inside the station, tensions ran high. Representatives from both factions gathered in a vast chamber, their faces etched with suspicion and hostility. Human delegates sat rigidly on one side, while Xelari envoys occupied the other, their golden eyes gleaming like watchful predators. At the center stood a raised platform where Elias and Lirael planned to unveil the truth. As the meeting began, accusations flew like daggers. Human officials accused the Xelari of stoking rebellion among colonies, while Xelari leaders countered with claims of aggression and territorial violations. The atmosphere crackled with barely contained fury, threatening to boil over at any moment. Then Elias stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "Enough," he shouted, silencing the room. All eyes turned to him as he placed the data chip onto the central console. Holographic projections sprang to life once again, showing humanity's betrayal during first contact. The sabotage, the lies, the bloodshed that followed. A stunned silence fell over the chamber. For a moment, no one spoke. Then outrage erupted, voices overlapping in disbelief and anger. Some human delegates tried to deny the evidence, calling it fabricated or manipulated. Others demanded answers, turning on their own leaders. Across the aisle, Xelari envoys exchanged heated whispers, their expressions shifting from shock to fury. Amidst the turmoil, Lirael rose to her feet, her presence commanding immediate attention. "This is not about blame," she said firmly, her voice ringing clear. "It's about understanding. For centuries, we've allowed fear and hatred to divide us. But now we have a choice, to cling to the past or build a future together." Her words struck a chord, quieting the room once more. Slowly, some began to nod. Not everyone, but enough to create a ripple of agreement. Among them was Ambassador Tarek, a respected human diplomat who stood up to address the crowd. "She's right," he declared. "We can't undo what's been done, but we can choose how we move forward. Let this be the beginning of reconciliation, not another chapter of war." Not everyone was swayed. Extremists on both sides vowed retaliation, vowing to undermine any efforts toward peace. Outside the station, ships loyal to rogue factions gathered ominously, ready to strike. But for the first time, moderate voices gained traction, pushing back against those who sought to perpetuate conflict. Elias watched silently, feeling the weight of everything they'd fought for settling around him. He glanced at Lirael, who met his gaze with a small, knowing smile. They hadn't won yet. Not fully, but they had planted a seed. And sometimes that was all it took to start breaking the chains of the past. As the summit adjourned, Elias realized something important. The battle wasn't just about exposing the truth. It was about proving that hope could survive even in the darkest of times. The emergency summit ended with a fragile but undeniable sense of progress. While not everyone agreed on the path forward, enough voices rose in favor of reconciliation to push through landmark agreements. Both human and Xelari leaders committed to forming a joint council tasked with addressing grievances, fostering transparency, and rebuilding trust. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but for the first time in centuries, there was genuine hope that peace might endure. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Elias lingered behind, watching as Lirael spoke quietly with her advisors. Her golden eyes caught his, and she excused herself to join him near the observation window overlooking the vast expanse of space. Together, they gazed out at the stars, their reflections faintly visible in the glass. "You did it," Lirael said softly, breaking the silence. "You gave them a reason to believe." Elias shook his head, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "We did it. You were the one who showed me the truth and gave me the courage to fight for it." Lirael tilted her head slightly, studying him with an expression that seemed both curious and tender. "Do you feel it? The echoes of your past life?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Sometimes, not as clearly as before, but yeah, I think Aaron's still in here somewhere." He tapped his chest lightly, his voice tinged with wonder. "It's strange, isn't it, knowing you've lived another life entirely?" "It's rare," Lirael admitted, "but not unheard of. Souls carry fragments of their journeys, even across lifetimes. Yours carried something special, a desire to heal what was broken." Elias chuckled dryly. "If only I'd known sooner. Maybe things would have turned out differently." "Maybe," Lirael replied thoughtfully. "Or maybe this moment was always meant to happen. After all, destiny has a way of finding us when we're ready." They stood in companionable silence for a while longer, letting the enormity of what they had achieved sink in. Outside, the rogue faction's ships remained stationed nearby, a stark reminder that resistance wouldn't vanish overnight. But Elias felt no fear, only resolve. For every step backward, there were countless others moving forward. That was enough to keep going. Eventually, Lirael turned to face him fully, her expression softening. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Will you return to Earth, to your old life?" Elias considered the question, glancing down at his hands, the same ones that had once held a rifle, now resting peacefully by his sides. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I think, wherever I go, I'll keep working toward this, toward peace. If nothing else, I owe it to Aaron, and to myself, to see this through." Lirael smiled, her gaze warm and approving. "Then perhaps our paths will cross again someday. Until then," she extended her hand, palm open, in a gesture of farewell. Elias reached out, clasping her hand firmly. "Until then." As they parted ways, Elias couldn't help but glance back one last time. Lirael stood framed against the starlit backdrop, her silver robes shimmering like moonlight. In that moment, he knew their bond transcended lifetimes, not just because of shared memories, but because of the future they had dared to imagine together. Back aboard his transport ship, Elias leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes. The name Aran echoed faintly in his mind, no longer a burden but a beacon. Somewhere beyond the void, amidst the endless expanse of stars, he felt certain that the soul of the man he used to be smiled too. For the first time in years, Elias Drake allowed himself to dream, not of battles or losses, but of a new dawn rising over two peoples united under the same sky. And as his ship drifted into the infinite unknown, he knew the journey was far from over. It never truly was. ****, the end ****.